How to do a trigger job on the Smith and Wesson Model 22A1. First, check the weapon, see that it's clear. Wear eyes when you disassemble a weapon. Take off the barrel, like so. Take off the grips, and you'll see the inside of the weapon. Cock this down and place your finger over this area, because this spring might make the whole part come out. Now, what you need to do is remove this plate. Take out the trigger and the trigger group by taking out that pin. You'll see the hammer and a bar that keeps the extractor in place, or a roll pin. This part is the magazine safety that will prevent the weapon from firing unless the magazine is inside the weapon. This is the main spring, and behind the main spring you can see a leaf spring which is attached to the sear, which you can see right there. Now, how to get this off. It's attached in three places, there, there, and there. This is the main part. What you have to do is lift this plate out of this groove and that little hole up there and push the whole thing to the right. I just sort of pull it out of the two holes and then rotate it downwards, and then I just push the whole plate to the right. You might have to use a bit of force. There it comes off. This part you can just put aside. Now this the safety comes off. What you'll see now is part of the trigger group. This is part of the sear. It comes out of a small hole. This part can also just be removed after you've pulled out the trigger group. Next step, take out the trigger. Notice how the trigger return spring goes into the notch right there. You need to push that little arm of the spring to the right and over the edge, the right edge of this stainless steel part, which is part of the trigger group. You can do that with a little punch. Like so. Now that's in front. And this part comes out. Now you have the trigger and the trigger return spring. Just push that out and the whole thing comes out. When you reattach this spring hooks on the edge the lower edge of the trigger. Just keep that in mind. This comes out. If you don't put it back in, the weapon will fire without a magazine. I do recommend you leave that in. Now, the easiest way to do this is to hammer out the roll pin, but not completely. Hammer the roll pin so it is still contained in the right part of the frame of the gun. So don't hammer this roll pin completely out of the frame, just so it's still attached to the right side of the frame. Like so. So this is the sear, the extractor, the roll pin, the hammer attached to the hammer pin. You can now push the hammer forward in the forward position by just pushing on that sear there. Keep your arm or hand like that because the whole spring system will come out. Like so. Now you can push or hammer out the pin that's attached to the hammer, and the hammer falls out. Now, down here you can see part of the sear. Sear leaf spring hooks into the sear. Easy to remove, more difficult to get in, but I'll show you a trick how to do it. Extractor comes out when you pull out or push out the roll pin and the hammer pin. Push this out. Leaf spring, sear. The easiest way is just to shake it out. And now you've stripped the frame. How to do a trigger job. The hammer engages the sear like that. See if I can show it a bit better. Catches on that edge. It has a half cock as well. So what you want to do when you do a trigger job on this weapon is to polish this area and also these two notches on the hammer. I've polished them previously, but now to make the trigger even better, I've started to round this edge a bit. If you do that, be very careful. Remove a few thousandths, then put it back in the weapon. Try the weapon, see that it will fire as intended and normal, and then if you're not happy with the trigger, remove slightly more. So that's how you disassemble it. I'll now do some polishing and come back with how to reassemble the weapon. So I've now polished the hammer and the sear. I also put some dry graphite for lubrication. Now how to put this back together. The most difficult part is getting the sear in, and it's a bit fidgety getting the extractor back in as well. I'll show you my way to do it. So the sear goes in from the back, not the front. If you try to put it in from the front, you'll have difficulties. Sear, you use your punch. Find the punch that fits. Maybe this one then. The sear has a hole, and you can get a punch through it. You align it so that the notch on the sear will catch on the hole from the inside, and you can use that to rotate the sear into place. Let's see if we can get this. So bring it in from the rear and try to, let's see, try to get the little metal protrusion on the sear to fall into the hole. You might have to try this a few times. There we go. Sorry I didn't get that on camera. But now it's in place. You can see the protrusion going through the hole there. I usually orientate the sear and just using the punch to secure it into place like so. Now the sear is in there. Now getting the leaf spring back in. I just use force. It might not be the best way to do it. Putting the pin back in, then the leaf spring. It has a concave part and a small protrusion that is convex at the edge. This little edge hooks up under the sear, on the front side of the sear. You can see when you sort of work it that the sear is moving. Now you have to get this part under this bar. I just use force and sort of bend it under. It's a spring after all. And now it's in place. Now getting the hammer back in. Hammer spring or mainspring. Just place it in there. That goes sort of over the leaf spring. Use your index finger. Put the hammer in the forward position and just push down until you see the holes align. Now I found it the easier way to do this, or easiest, is to place the hammer pin on a stable surface, align the holes, and just push the whole thing down. Now don't push it all the way in, and I'm going to show you why. Just push it so it'll go sort of through the hammer but not all the way in, through the frame on the left side of the weapon. that. You can see there's still an edge, or the opening here. This is because we have to put the extractor back in. Now, how to put the extractor back in? It's easy, it just goes in like that, but you have to drive the roll pin and the hammer pin in to catch it. What I do is I first remove the hammer out of the way, sort of in the half cock position. Hammer the roll pin almost all the way through so that it'll sort of hook on, hold the extractor into place, and then rotate the extractor until the holes align on the other side of the frame, and then drive the hammer pin back through. Now, how this is oriented, by the way, it's sort of obvious, but on the inside of the frame it sort of sticks like this. So you have to put it down like that and drive the 2 pins through. Not sure if you can see it, but now the roll pin is holding the extractor sort of roughly in place. A few more thousandths and it'll sort of hold it. Now, using your punch, you can make it aligned, then align the other hole, and once they're aligned, hammer both through. There you go. Now they're back. Make sure that this is all the way through. Make sure the roll pin is flush with the frame. Sort of like that. Now, do remember to put this back in. If you forget it, you have to put the plate back, or take the plate off again. So the magazine safety back in. Now the trigger. So remember the spring and the hooks sort of on the back of the trigger. Just pull the place the trigger back in. Like that. Oh, trying to show it, made it fall out again. You'll know it when you see it. Now you need the pin. Just make sure that it goes through the hole, through the trigger return spring. You can probably just drop it in like this as well. Not sure if you can see this, but it's probably the best angle. Just push it back. Now remember how we removed or pushed that spring out of the way. Part of the trigger group, this goes in like so, but as you can see, the spring, the trigger return spring arm has to go in front of this bar and into that notch. So I'll bring it partly all the way out again there, and push it forward. Bring the stainless steel part in while you do. There you go. It's back in. Now this part goes down and hooks onto that area, and you just push it all the way. Now cocking the hammer and pulling the trigger should make the hammer go forward if there's a magazine in. Let's see. Oh, yes, it does. So, we know that works. Now, putting the plate back in, making sure that you put all the parts in the gun. Safety just hooks onto the protrusion of the hammer pin. The plate clamps on. What you do is an exact reverse of how to pull it off. Start sort of down like this. You might have to use more force now than when you pulled it off. I've removed this a few times, so it gets easier every time. Sort of align it like that and push the whole thing forward. While pressing it into the frame. You might have to use a tool for this. If you place it like this and push on this edge, it'll sort of halfway clamp into place. And there you go. I'm not sure if that came out right, but at least it's in place. You might have to try this a few times. The critical part is that this notch is pushed all the way in, so you can't see any space on the right side of the pin holding the hammer. Alright, now that's in place. Now we can put this piece back on. I assume this is sort of a guide rod. This piece placed like that. The plastic piece goes into the back of the frame, so like that, with a hole and a notch upwards. Spring, push forward, holding the whole thing down with your finger, and not do that. That's why you keep your finger there. Again, wear eyes. You might get a spring somewhere you don't want it. So Keep your finger on that area. Cock the whole thing back, lock it in place. Still keep your finger on. Barrel back in. There you go. Now this should go off with the magazine in. Let's try the trigger. Oh, that might be too much. That is light. Whoa. So do it stepwise. This is a serious light trigger. Time will show whether or not it's match grade or will be too light for matches. Anyways, it's now beautiful. So put the grips back on and you're good to go. So that's how you field strip, disassemble, do a trigger job, and reassemble the Smith and Wesson 22A1.